Welcome, dear listeners, to Cawing Around, where realms collide and the ordinary dances with the extraordinary. I'm your host, Jessie Alford, and together we'll traverse the shadowed forests of speculative fiction. In this journey, we'll unravel tales of forgotten gods, starships lost in cosmic storms, and ancient spells whispered by moonlight. We'll speak with our favorite scribes and dissect the dreamscape for the ethereal and the chthonic. Whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, or horror, prepare to be captivated. Let's take flight into the unknown. So, grab your quills and parchment, for here, dreams take flight, and reality bends like a raven's wing. Let's begin. Thank you for joining us. This week, we'll have a chat with a standout scribe from Issue One, Sunset. Colleen Feldner took us to great heights with her flash fiction, In the Setting Sun, a post-apocalyptic tale of Earth's future contained within a domed habitat. She lives in Wisconsin with her husband, 2 daughters, and 2 feline riding companions. She enjoys reading just about everything, cooking, and spinning wool into yarn. She has her bachelor's in English from Carroll University and is pursuing her master's degree in creative writing at Southern New Hampshire University. The team here at Snoozine wants to say thank you so much to Colleen for submitting your fabulous piece to us and even agreeing to this interview. But before we embark on this exploratory journey through Colleen's writing process, I want to point out another very special guest who joined us for this interview, Frogbert the Toad. You'll hear him and his merry band of mates making quite the ruckus at times. And please trust that Jerome the Crow is on the hunt for these dastardly disturbers. But until he finds them, please bear with us. All right, let's get into it. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for coming in and joining us. And thank you to Colleen for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we really loved your short story that we have in this issue, Sunset. We're going to ask you lots and lots of questions about In the Setting Sun because it just absolutely captured all of us. It took us to such a beautiful place, even though I would also say it's kind of a sad place, but we will give you plenty of room to talk about that later. First, Jerome is demanding, absolutely demanding, won't get off my shoulder, that we ask you about your favorite shinies, because your piece was so shiny, so captivating, that as he's flying over this literary landscape, he just had to swoop in and pick it up. So he wants to know what kind of shinies you like to pick up and take back to your nest.
All right. Well, it might not be a surprise given the story we're talking about that some of the shiniest things I think of are things in space. I grew up in the era of space camp when all things space were super cool, and so those are some of my favorite things. But I would also say some things on Earth, like amber, maybe a little Victorian filigree, and sapphires.
Okay. So I have to know personally, did you go to space camp?
No, I wanted to, desperately wanted to, but no.
Dang.
Space camp was not
Maybe that's something, yeah.
not in my cards. No.
Well, maybe that's something you can explore
There you go.
in future writing. So now that we're kind of launching into your writing, we want you to tell us about yourself and how you got started in speculative fiction specifically.
Um, Boy, that's like a two-pronged question. Um, I think how I got my start in speculative fiction would be with reading and with sort of the zeitgeist too of the time in which I grew up. Like I said, space camp was a big deal. All the shuttles were happening at that time, but also there were things on television like Star Trek you could get a hold of. There was Star Wars, big movies happening. So like all that was kind of out there. But I think mostly I have been reading speculative fiction since I was a kid, whether that's fantasy or science fiction. I've read a lot of both, and I think that is sort of what inspires me to continue to write in that genre.
Would you say that you lean more towards one side or the other? Do you like science fiction a little more, maybe fantasy?
Um, I would say normally I have lent more towards fantasy, but here I tried this thing and it worked out pretty well. So I don't know. I might be leaning the other way now.
Yeah, you did science fiction very beautifully here, in a way that you didn't have to play too hard on going into hard science fiction or taking us into a completely separate galaxy. You kept us at home in a really dangerous way that I loved seeing in this piece.
Thank you.
So I want to know what inspired this specific piece. I mean, you mentioned space camp, and I can definitely see how that line of thinking might be related to what happens in the setting sun. But was there something else?
Yeah, this one is it's an interesting galaxy of symptoms.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the theme for this issue, Sunset, which
Hmm.
sparked a memory of my childhood that started to haunt me. And
Oh.
my husband and I had been watching Fallout on, I think that one was on Prime. And I had recently had one of my works in progress criticized for lack of setting by a professor.
Oh no.
It's fine. I mean,
It
like,
happens.
makes us stronger,
Yeah.
right? Right.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all of that together caused me to write down in my writer's notebook corn, but in a dome.
Oh, was there a question mark after the
Oh,
dome,
there
or is that
was. Yep. I was like,
okay? Yeah.
maybe that. And so when I
Yeah.
sat down, I was like, initially, I was attempting just to get the threads of that memory to surround me, to get inside of it and to make it feel the way it felt and hear the way it heard and get it as perfect a setting as I could get it.
Yeah.
And then I put it in a dome and burned the world.
Yeah, you did it very well.
Thank you.
Shout out to your teacher for being too hard on you
Right.
because we got something great out of it. So, is that to say that you in other pieces might have found that you struggled with the setting? Because the setting that you paint in the setting sun is really gorgeous. It's so picturesque. It's so easy to put myself as the reader into this world and feel the sun as its supernovas. Um, is there a process that you discovered for developing your setting because of that teacher, or is it something that you already knew how to do?
I think I've learned that it has to be really intentional. I, I when I read, I tend to see it as a movie
Sure.
happening in behind my eyes, and that's how I can tell when I've fallen asleep when the movie keeps going, but I realize I'm not actually reading the words anymore.
Right, right.
um, so when I think about creating setting, I think that I have to maybe be more intentional about it because as I'm writing, I'm seeing the movie and I sort of forget, I think, to describe it. Um,
Sure.
so, so I think when you're writing setting, I think I've learned you have to be really intentional about it and really try to picture it in your head and fill in the details.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had similar struggles in my personal writing career as well. And even one of our editors, if she wants to speak up, setting is how you say it has to be super intentional. One of our editors has aphantasia, which means that she actually does not have that mechanism in her brain that shows it like a movie.
Oh,
She literally only has the words on the page to be able to see what's happening. So saying that it has to be intentional that way, I think is a really clever way of putting it because you have to consider how people are visualizing your novel outside of yourself, right?
sure.
Sorry, we got a little lecture.
No, that makes sense.
So let's move from setting into character. Um, how did you develop these characters? You said this was based off of a memory of yours. Does that mean that you're also basing your characters off of this memory? Did you create them specifically for this world?
Yes, it all sort of came from that memory. So in this specific case, the memory was mine. So I sort of expected that woman to be me. But of course, she is and she isn't, just like all good characters. Um,
Right.
I leaned on my experience to build her because I needed it to be in the future, not where we are today. So I had to build on my experience of people who are older to try to capture some of those feelings. Um, when my father was dying of cancer, he had expressed that he had wished he could have gone more quickly. Maybe like his dad who died of a heart attack. So that was, sort of a sentiment I tried to use when I imagined her imagining uh, her or seeing her friends, going sooner in different ways. Like
Right.
that maybe she was a little bit jealous of that. That maybe this extension on life was not all that it was cracked up to be. Um,
Yeah.
so so I definitely drew on those kinds of experiences to sort of round her out and push her into the future, make her older, make her less me. Um, and I also drew on my experience of that childhood memory, my experience of it as an adult. So I say that it haunted me because that is exactly what it did. I could not get away from this memory. It was all I could think about for weeks. Um, and finally, I figured out that it was because it was a time in my childhood when I was entirely safe and entirely free. But as
Right.
children, we don't understand that. It's only in looking back on it that we understand, sort of what we've lost.
Right.
um,
Absolutely.
and that we know that we need to like sort of treasure that and hold on to it. Um, so I guess that's all to say. I try to make the characters real.
Yeah, no, they came off very real, and you talk about the depth with which you really set about to make these characters come off the page, and I personally could feel through them and just through the plot that you had that they were so immersed in the themes that you were working with as well. I think it might be fair to say that reflection, maybe introspection, might be a theme that you worked on, as well as even some climate issues. And I thought that was really well represented in your characters.
Oh, thank you.
Oh my God, you're so welcome. So that's what I took away from it, but we all have subjective experiences when we come into these works. Is there something that you were specifically hoping that the readers would take away from this piece?
From this piece specifically, um, I think I think as writers, what we want to do is to connect with readers in some way. So, what I would want someone to take away from anything would be maybe something of themselves or a feeling that they've been seen or heard because they've felt the same way or the same thing a character has felt. Um, Maybe that they would learn something new about themselves, uh, or even just had some measure of escape or entertainment, or connected with the characters um, in a sort of visceral way. Uh, my first friends were characters in books, so like that would be a thing I would want to pass on.
Beautiful. We love someone who's so considerate of their readers and everyone around them. And as we can feel that from you so strongly, is there any kind of advice that you'd want to give to any other writers who are in the trenches with you?
This is a little reductionist and possibly redundant, but right. You
Absolutely. Right.
have to write. um,
Yeah.
and also like know your genre. Dive into the books, the TV shows, the movies, whatever it is that will give you that sort of vast well of images and ideas that you'll need to be able to draw from as you write. I mean
Absolutely.
that piece was such a conglomeration of things that were happening inside my head that were sort of disconnected even. Um, and I think you need all of that in order to write.
I couldn't agree more with you, and it's almost like you're giving us a shout out now because wink wonk, we do have a blog series on genres and subgenres of speculative fiction where you can really immerse yourselves, listeners, uh, in the genres so that you can write them fluidly and beautifully the way that Colleen wrote this piece. We just want to know one more thing before Jerome's last question. We want to know if you're working on anything else, Colleen. Can you give us a little bitty sneak peek?
For sure. I have a couple of irons in the fire. Um,
Ooh.
I am I am working on a novel with dragon shifters, but I'm also working on some shorter pieces. Maybe something historical with vampires. Maybe something with a nightmare lurking in the back of my brain.
It sounds juicy and delicious, and I'm so excited to see you come out with it. So you have to let us know when these pieces start coming out in the world so that we can share them with everyone.
Awesome.
All right, our last question from Jerome. This has been kind of not a long interview, but it's enough for him to work up his appetite, and especially after soaring through the skies and finding all these lovely pieces for this issue. And he's hungry and he does want a snack. So he wants to know, from your viewpoint, what is the tastiest looking bug and where can he find it?
Well, I don't know about tasty, but we have an inordinate amount of stink bugs around here. They are positively Paleolithic looking. And I would love it if he could swing by and take a few of them out of the universe.
Yeah, I'm sure that we could ask him very nicely to do so. I wonder if they taste as bad as they smell.
I hope not.
But maybe it's like a delicacy, right?
Right. Could be like crunchy,
yeah.
like crickets, maybe.
Yeah. Or we can just tell him that they're very rare, actually. They may seem like there's a lot of them here, but literally they're only right there. You can't find them anywhere else in the world, and maybe that'll, convince him. Okay, thank you so much for joining us, Colleen, and we so enjoyed talking with you. Is there any single last thing that you want to say before we end this?
Just thank you so much. It was fabulous to be able to talk to you about this piece. I really I enjoyed writing it. It surprised me, and I hope it surprises you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode of Cawing Around. We hope our journey into speculative fiction has stirred your imagination and left you eager for more. If you enjoyed this chat, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Follow us on social media to stay updated with the latest from our literary dreamscape. Until next time, keep your quills sharp and your minds open. Jerome the Crow will return to guide us into new realms soon, so remember, you're never alone in the labyrinth of imagination. Until next week, when the moon waxes full and the stars whisper anew, keep your eyes skyward. This has been Cawing Around. May your flights be wild, your tales boundless, and your hearts forever curious.